What if I told you about a dog that lay for weeks on its owner's grave, defying storms, hunger, and the bitter cold? It refused every morsel of food, ignored all words of comfort, as if the world had lost its meaning now that the one it loved was gone. People whispered that it was merely the fleeting grief of a loyal pet, but as days passed, through dark nights and weary afternoons, it remained there, an unyielding shadow in the desolate cemetery. Visitors, moved by pity, brought food and stretched out their hands, but the dog paid no heed. Then one man, captivated by the mystery in those deep brown eyes, set out to uncover the truth. What he found was not just heartbreaking. It was a wound that cut deep into the soul, a story beyond imagination. And what happened next? Stay with me until the end, for this journey will change the way you see loyalty forever. The cemetery lay in silence, broken only by the biting autumn wind rustling through skeletal branches, scattering dry leaves onto the worn pathways. The sky hung heavy and gray, stretching eerie shadows of weathered tombstones across the damp earth. Among the cold forest of gravestones, one stood out, not because of fresh flowers or intricate design, but because of an unwavering presence. Rex, an old, frail German shepherd, lay stretched across the icy marble slab, his emaciated body pressed tightly against it as if trying to merge with the stone. His once thick coat was now matted and stiff with dirt and rain, ribs jutting sharply beneath his thin skin, an unspoken testament to time's cruelty. His deep brown eyes, now clouded by grief and age, never strayed from the engraved words. Michael Dawson, beloved son, friend, hero. Weeks had passed, and Rex had not been seen anywhere else, not in shelter from the nightly downpours, not seeking warmth from the biting wind, not even moving to escape the scorching midday sun. He lay there, motionless, a living statue waiting for something no one dared to name. No one knew exactly when Rex had arrived. The cemetery staff initially assumed he was a lost stray, perhaps belonging to a grieving visitor. But as days turned into weeks, they began to grasp the chilling truth: Rex was not merely mourning. He was waiting, bound by a determination so haunting it sent shivers through those who witnessed it. Passers-by couldn't hold back their sorrow. An elderly woman, her frail hands trembling, placed a steaming bowl of rice a few steps away, whispering, "Eat, dear, don't starve yourself." Rex did not lift his head, his eyes locked on the gravestone. A young man, bright-eyed and full of warmth, knelt beside him with a leash in hand, his voice gentle. "Come with me. I'll give you a home." Rex's ears flicked, but he remained still, as if every offer of kindness was nothing but a passing breeze. By the second week, dozens had tried, leaving food, water, even attempting to carry him away, but Rex would only let out a weak growl, pressing himself closer to the stone, surviving only on the rare raindrops collecting around the grave. Walter Green, the cemetery's 62-year-old caretaker, had seen all shades of grief in his 3 decades of service. He had watched mothers wail over their children's graves, fathers standing in silent agony before marble headstones, but this was different. It was beyond anything he had ever known. Every morning, as he walked through mist-laden paths, he saw Rex lying there, unmoved, as if time had ceased to flow for him. "You can't stay here forever, boy," Walter muttered one morning, narrowing his eyes at the withering figure of the once mighty shepherd. But deep inside, an uneasy feeling stirred. Rex was not just lingering out of sorrow. Something held him there, bound by an invisible thread, a silent promise to the one who had left him behind. By the 3rd week, the harsh truth could no longer be hidden. Rex was fading away. The once proud German shepherd was now skin and bones, his dull, dirt-covered fur clinging to his frail frame, trembling in the early winter cold. His brown eyes, though still holding a final glimmer of pride, grew hazier with each passing day. Yet he refused to leave. Walter knelt a few steps away, his calloused hands clenched tightly, letting out a heavy sigh. "You're going to die, boy," he murmured, his deep voice laced with helplessness. Rex blinked slowly, as if he heard but had no response. Walter ran a hand through his silver hair, his mind tangled with worry. He couldn't bear to watch any longer. A soul as loyal as Rex did not deserve to wither away in solitude among cold gravestones. That night, As darkness blanketed the cemetery, Walter returned to his small home. Under the dim light, he rummaged through an old cupboard and pulled out a thick, worn wool blanket, a keepsake from his late wife that he rarely touched. He wrapped up a leftover piece of beef, still fragrant from dinner, filled a bowl with fresh water, and grabbed his old flashlight. Under the pitch-black sky, the cold wind cut through his thin coat as he walked back to the cemetery, his heavy boots crunching against the damp grass. His breath formed white mist in the freezing air. As the flashlight beam reached Michael Dawson's grave, he saw Rex, still there, shivering violently, his frail body pressed against the tombstone as if afraid to leave, even for a moment. Walter swallowed hard, his chest tightening. Rex didn't have much time left. Carefully, he placed the water bowl and the meat nearby, the scent faintly rising in the cold air. Then, he unfolded the wool blanket and gently draped it over Rex's thin body. The dog flinched, a weak reflex, but didn't resist, a small sign that warmed Walter's heart for a brief moment. He sat down beside Rex, pulling his coat tighter against the bitter wind. "I know you're waiting for him, buddy," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "But he's not coming back." Rex didn't move, but for the first time in days, his weary brown eyes left the tombstone and turned to Walter, not looking through him, but truly seeing him. In those eyes, Walter saw a deep sorrow, an unspoken question, "Can I let go?" And in that moment he understood, this wasn't just loyalty, it was a battle between life and memory. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, as pale sunlight crept over the horizon, Walter returned with a newfound determination. He didn't come alone. He carried a small wooden box, inside which lay something he had found in the cemetery archives, an old collar, engraved with the words Rex, Michael's hero. It had been forgotten in a dusty corner, perhaps since the day Michael passed away. Walter knelt beside Rex, who was now weaker than ever, his breath slow and faint. "If you can't leave him," Walter said, his voice trembling, "then at least let me take you back to where he once called home." He fastened the collar around Rex's neck, his hands shaking as he secured the clasp. Rex stirred slightly, letting out a faint whimper, not of resistance, but of fragile acceptance. Walter knew he couldn't save Rex alone. He stood up, his eyes red, and made a decision, to seek out the only place that might truly understand Rex, the fire station where Michael Dawson had lived and served. As he pushed open the door, the scent of smoke and sweat lingered in the air. A young firefighter looked up from the reception desk. "I need to talk about Rex," Walter said urgently. The young man frowned, then his eyes widened in recognition. "Rex? Michael's dog?" He stood up, his voice lowering. "He's still there, isn't he?" Walter nodded, and the story he told next sent chills down the firefighter's spine, a story of Rex, Michael, and a promise that was never broken. Walter stood in the fire station hall, the air tinged with the scent of smoke and machine oil, a smell that brought back memories of the days when Michael Dawson used to run through here, his heavy boots thudding against the floor, his smile bright. The young firefighter, his name was Jake, according to the tag on his chest, looked at Walter with an expression that was both curious and sorrowful. "Rex was part of this place," Jake said, his voice dropping as if speaking of a lost brother. "Michael saved him from a burning house when he was just a skinny little pup. He brought him back here, raised him among the red fire trucks and the sound of sirens. Rex wasn't just a pet, he was one of us." Walter listened, his fingers tightening around the old collar in his pocket. The cold metal against his skin sent a sharp ache through his heart. "He never left Michael's side, did he?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Jake nodded, his gaze distant. "Never. Whenever Michael ran into a fire, Rex would always follow, if only to wait outside. The day Michael didn't come back from that last fire," he trailed off, swallowing hard, "we found Rex at the station door, howling through the night as if he knew Michael was never coming home. Then he disappeared. We thought someone had taken him in, or worse, that he had died somewhere, alone. But now you're telling me he's at the cemetery." Jake shook his head, his voice catching. I can't believe he's been waiting all this time. The door behind Jake swung open, and an older man stepped out, Tom Reynolds, the fire chief. His face was lined with years of battling flames, his sharp blue eyes carrying the weight of countless memories. He wore a gray uniform, his boots still dusted with ash, a silent testament to the life he had dedicated to saving others. "Rex is still alive?" Tom asked directly, his voice deep and commanding. Walter nodded, though worry was evident in his eyes. "He is, but not for much longer. He's weak, won't eat, won't drink, just lies there, waiting to die on Michael's grave." Tom said nothing more. He simply turned to Jake. "Get the truck ready. We're bringing him home." Within minutes, the red fire truck rolled through the misty streets, its engine humming low, breaking the early morning stillness. Walter sat in the back, gripping the old collar tightly, his heart heavy. He didn't know if Rex would be willing to leave, or if they were already too late. When they arrived at the cemetery, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow over the cold, unyielding gravestones. Tom led the way, followed by Jake and a young female firefighter named Louise, each carrying a quiet determination. They walked across the dewy grass, boots crunching softly against the damp earth, until they saw Rex, lying motionless atop Michael's grave, his frail body trembling, his cloudy brown eyes fixed on the headstone. Louise let out a quiet breath, her eyes misting over. "Oh God, he's still here!" Jake knelt down, resting a hand on his knee. "Rex, do you remember us?" he murmured. The dog's ears twitched slightly, but he didn't lift his head. Tom stepped closer, his expression darkening at the sight of Rex's condition, his filthy, matted fur, his ribs protruding, his breath weak and shallow like a flickering flame on the verge of going out. He knelt beside him, his calloused hand gently stroking the dog's back. "Rex," he said, his voice deep but gentle, "it's time to go home, buddy." Rex didn't move, only blinking slowly, as if too weak to even acknowledge the words. Walter stood behind them, his chest tightening. "I told you," he whispered. "He won't leave." But Tom wasn't ready to give up. He leaned in closer, his voice softer now, like a man speaking to an old friend. "Michael wouldn't want this, Rex. He always said you were the team's hero, strong, never giving up. You have to live. For him. For all of us." His words hung in the air, filling the silence. And then, a miracle happened. Rex let out a faint whimper, a barely audible sound, but the first he had made in weeks. His tired eyes flickered, glancing at Tom, then shifting toward Jake and Louise, as if recognizing the faces he once knew. Jake let out a shaky laugh, quickly wiping his eyes. "He heard you." Louise brought over a bowl of water and some food from the truck, setting it down near Rex, but the dog still didn't move. Tom sighed, his eyes red. "He wants to go, but his body won't let him." He looked to Jake and Louise, giving a firm nod. "We have to take him back, whether he wants to or not." They moved carefully, lifting Rex's frail body. The dog whimpered softly but didn't resist, his limbs limp, as if he had already surrendered. Walter followed closely, his heart pounding. "Will he make it?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Tom didn't answer. He simply held Rex a little tighter, as if holding on to a piece of Michael's memory. When they returned to the fire station, a heavy silence filled the air. They placed Rex in a warm corner of the hall, a soft bed waiting for him, beside an old blanket of Michael's that someone had found in storage. The familiar scent seemed to stir something in Rex. His nose twitched slightly, and his eyes opened just a little wider. Jake knelt beside him, whispering, "You're home, Rex. Rest now." But Rex didn't eat. He didn't drink. He just lay there, his slow gaze wandering across the station, as if searching for Michael's presence among the red trucks. That night, Walter stayed with the firefighters. He sat by Rex, telling him stories he had heard from Jake, of the times Rex ran alongside Michael into burning buildings, of the afternoons he basked in the sun beside the fire trucks, waiting for his best friend to return. "You were a warrior, weren't you?" Walter murmured, running a hand over the dog's graying fur. Rex's tail gave a weak wag, just once, faint but real. It was enough to make Walter smile through his tears. But he knew, and so did everyone else, Rex didn't have much time left. The next morning, as the first light of dawn streamed through the fire station windows, Walter stepped inside and saw Rex lying still on his bed, eyes closed, his breath forever stilled. Beside him, Michael's blanket remained, his final comfort. Tom stood quietly, his hat in his hands, his voice thick with emotion. He waited until he was home. Jake turned away, wiping his eyes, while Louise placed a single flower beside Rex, whispering, "Thank you, hero." They held a small ceremony at the station. A wooden box containing Rex's ashes was placed beside Michael's memorial plaque, with an added inscription, "Rex, the Eternal Companion." The townspeople came, bringing flowers, sharing stories of Michael and the dog who never left his side. Walter stood there, looking at the two names on the plaque, feeling a weight lift from his heart. "You kept your promise to him," he whispered. "Now rest." But Rex's story wasn't just a sad ending. It was proof that loyalty could transcend even death, that love could outshine the darkest of days. And out there, many dogs still waited for a home, a chance to love and be loved. If this story touched your heart, open it, because every Rex in the world deserves a place to call home.